Okay, it is now 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time, and we are going to get started. So thank you again for joining Using Twitter Effectively in Navigating Virtual Residency Recruitment and Neurology Medical Education webinar. All participants are muted, and if you are having any technical difficulties, we recommend disconnecting from the webinar and reconnecting. Connect using computer audio or by the dial-in option. You do not need to use both. And if you continue to have technical difficulties, send a message through the chat feature and we will try to assist you. For questions to the panelists, please use the Q&A feature, not chat, and we will answer them throughout. I'm pleased to introduce our panel members for today. Our moderator is Dr. Aaron Zelikovich from Weill Cornell, New York Presbyterian. Our panelists are Dr. Joshua Voodoo from Massachusetts General Hospital, Dana Farber Cancer Institute, and Brigham and Women's Hospital in Harvard University, Dr. Gianna Dawood from Weill Cornell, New York Presbyterian, Dr. Stephanie Reyes from Duke University, Dr. Eric Juarez from University of California, Los Angeles, Dr. Susie Farris from Wake Forest School of Medicine. Dr. Zelikovich, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Allison and Lucy and all the AN for inviting us to come and talk to you all tonight. This is being recorded, which is great. So if you guys have any questions or want to come back to something, you will have access to all of this in the future as well. Normally, I would go into a big spiel at this point. However, we have 5 amazing residents and fellows who know just as much, if not more, as me. So I'm not going to waste any time. But the goal of this is for them to give you each a flavor of how they use Twitter when they were navigating residency recruitment or fellowship recruitment. And they're going to give you different and unique perspectives that then we'll be able to have kind of a dialogue in between and midway through this session. And at the end, we'll be able to answer some of your specific questions that you may have. So getting started, we're going to start with Dr. Stephanie Reyes.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm so happy to be here. Nice to see everyone. My name's Stephanie Reyes. I'm from Boston. Went to Harvard for undergrad. Spent some time doing research, and then went to Michigan for medical school. And to share a little bit about my Twitter story, I feel like it's one of belonging, in that before hopping on Twitter, I struggled to find people within neurology that looked like me, or had similar experiences to mine. In my medical school, I didn't see any neurologists that were Black and female. And so I really struggled in my desire to pursue a career in neurology because I felt very alone and isolated, honestly. And so I went on Twitter to try to find a community within neurology that I could bond with. And that's exactly what I found. It was through initiatives like Black in Neurology, and then by following the Society of Black Neurologists, that I found that I'm actually not very different than a lot of neurologists that exist among the entire US and internationally. It's just that when you're isolated in one medical school or one state, it's hard to see beyond that. But Twitter allows for that, for you to meet a lot of different people with a lot of different experiences, and some that are not dissimilar to your own. And so that really helped me in pursuing my applications, because I felt empowered, and I felt like I belonged within a space, because a lot of the neurologists I started following on Twitter reminded me of myself and my passion for neurology. And then I started seeing applicants that looked a lot like me. And so in many ways, it helped me feel like I belonged in this space. And thankfully, I was able to grow my community, especially because of initiatives like the Neuro Twitter Network, where we had a database of a lot of different neurologists, and I was able to identify who were interested in movement disorders or in specialties that I was interested in, started following them and following their work. And so I felt like I was being immersed into the field of neurology prior to starting residency. Particularly, one experience that stands out for me that was very impactful and likely resulted in me being at Duke is I started following the Society of Black Neurologists page. Saw a lot of people, like I said, that looked like me. And one of the owners of that page is Dr. Andrew Spector, who is one of the associate directors here at Duke. and also the Chief Officer of Diversity and Inclusion within the neurology department. And when he saw that I had followed the page, he offered his support immediately, I think within a few days of me following, and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're interested in neurology. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you apply to Duke." Before knowing anything about me, I felt that support, and through that interaction, actually, we were able to talk a little bit about my interest in neurology and to talk a little bit about Duke and what they're doing in neurology. And I think that conversation just stuck with me, that amount of support. And I went through the application process, met a lot of amazing programs, and would have been happy in a lot of places. But that initial interaction from Twitter really solidified my interest to pursue my training in Duke. And so in many ways, I feel like I owe my residency experience now to me going on Twitter and finding my people ultimately. And so I hope Twitter serves everyone else in a similar way, where you get to find your community and also learn about programs and find your people through those interactions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Next, we will go to Dr. Voodoo.
Thanks, Aaron, and that was great, Stephanie. That's a great reason to join Twitter, and I have to say I have kind of similar experience in which the connections that I've formed are really, and the community that I've found are basically some of the strongest points of Twitter, and actually why I want to stay. A little bit of some background around me about me is that so I'm a current neuro-oncology fellow at Dana-Farber and at MGH here in Boston, and I did my residency here as well. And I've always been interested in social justice and advocacy. I've had a family tragedy that happened earlier that was the impetus for me to go into medical school. And I've always wanted to really give back to my community and address the social determinants of health and healthcare disparities. And when kind of COVID hit, as well as the racial tensions in the summer of 2020, that's where I think Twitter helped me find my own voice. And that's when I started writing. I started writing articles and opinion pieces speaking about COVID-19 healthcare disparities, speaking about social justice and what we can do as individuals as well as institutions to really tackle both personal, interpersonal, internalized, as well as institutional racism. And Twitter really gave me that outlet, that kind of area in which I could really advocate, I can be honest, and actually I was able to find a community of people who also felt the same way. And kind of when the recruiting season started for the 2020-2021, I kind of took a look back at my journey through medicine. So as a first-gen physician, it wasn't very easy. And I actually had benefited a lot during medical school from a lot of these opportunities that were kind of taken away from during COVID. So these visiting clerkships that were kind of sponsored by different institutions, the ability to visit places, and kind of just the connections that you made physically were kind of drawn away from COVID. So that's when I became more heavily involved in Twitter in terms of recruiting and kind of how people can use Twitter as a good resource for recruiting, and started the MGB, the Mass General Brigham Twitter page, in which we use to kind of connect residents with kind of applicants, as well as host different events. I'll kind of, there are lots of other things I can talk to you about Twitter and kind of about my story, but I will kind of say actually, initially I was hesitant to using Twitter, but actually Twitter has given me a couple publications that I've just kind of made from connections. One of my interns, co-interns who I did internship with in New York, connected with me about 1.5 years ago when I first got on Twitter, and we actually wrote a paper about diversity and inclusion for the virtual application season that actually was just published in Neurology about a month ago. And so that's kind of a roundabout way of saying that Twitter is a lot of things, and it is what you can make or take from it. But what I really want to stress for you is to find your community, and especially for the recruitment part, it's finding your community of fellow applicants. These are the people who are going to be your colleagues in the future, plus also finding the community of residency programs as well as fellowship programs that you're interested in, as well as following some of the residents and fellows there.
Thanks, Dr. Voodoo. And Dr. Dawood, can you share your story with us?
Yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. So I originally from Cincinnati, and I went to undergrad, as you can tell, at Johns Hopkins, and then did med school at the University of Toledo, and now I'm at Cornell with Aaron as a PGY1. And kind of my start with neuro Twitter actually happened in March of 2020. I think there was a bunch of different things that were going on that made it appropriate to get on Twitter at the time. So the AAN conference itself had been canceled, and that was something that I was really looking forward to. I remember going to multiple AAN conferences, and those were really opportunities for me to really network and find mentors. I think a big impetus of why I went into neurology, it was that I had so many positive interactions and reinforcements with different faculty members, both at my institutions in undergrad and for med school, but also, at the AAN conferences on a more of a national level. And so when I found out that the AAN conference was going to be virtual, or sorry, it was going to be canceled, that's when I kind of got on Twitter to kind of find my own networking opportunities. So really, neuro Twitter has been networking, research, and being able to really pursue my interest in medical education. And so after getting on Twitter, I think the first couple of things that I really engaged with were these weekly cases that were taking place online. It was kind of virtual teaching sessions. And through that, I was able to engage with people from different institutions. And now these people are my colleagues and people that I learn from on a daily basis as well. And then another thing that I realized was that I was really interested, and still am very interested in interventional neurology and stroke vascular neurology. And so I kind of learned to find the people to follow. And then I realized that there were so many great resources out there, but there wasn't one place to kind of see where everything is. And so I was actually able to work with Aaron, and I created the stroke Twitter page as well, and was able to basically put all of the research, all of the organizations, and kind of really anything that I thought would be helpful for people that were just getting started on Twitter, and specifically in vascular neurology, and bring people together, and having mentors listed as well, and mentees, and kind of trying to pair people with each other through the guide. So that's been really interesting, and I've had a lot of positive feedback and interactions with that, and as well as kind of just really being able to share my interest and passion about interventional neurology, given that it is a smaller field. So not only am I able to kind of, share my passion with people about neurology, but also pursue this field early on and kind of find out the right people to follow, interact with. So.
Thank you for sharing. Next, we will go to Dr. Juarez.
Hey guys, how are y'all? My name is Eric Martinez Juarez, and as you can see, you may not recognize that hometown of Bainbridge, Georgia, born and raised in a small town in deep rural Southwest Georgia. Actually attended the United States Military Academy at West Point for less than a year before I decided that wasn't for me, and I attended Harvard University subsequently and became close to best friends with Stephanie Reyes here before we drifted apart to separate medical schools. I attended the Medical College of Georgia in my beloved Georgia at Augusta University. And I'm now here sitting in sunny LA as a PGY1 at UCLA. And my story with Neuro Twitter kind of differs drastically with the folks you've already heard from right now, the three or so individuals that you've heard from by now. I consider them personally as like the godfathers, the godmothers of Neuro Twitter, because they kind of all collectively came together, right around last summer, and made this, happen. It's their own little creation, their own little baby. I kind of stood on the sidelines watching from the fringes, and decided, because Stephanie and Jana, whom I connected with on Neuro Twitter, were so actively involved in Neuro Twitter, I decided to hop on the train as well. I also did that because I'm I'm super active on social media to begin with, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. As you can see, I've had this particular Twitter account since, Twitter was born back in 2009. And so I decided, if I'm gonna waste time on Twitter, on social media, perusing through various pages, I may as well do it, somewhat productively. And so I decided to kind of switch over my personal Twitter account to more of a professional account while actively maintaining, my own personal style on this professional neuro Twitter account. I'll give you a few examples, much in the same way as Stephanie. Last year I used Twitter primarily to find a sense of belonging, to find a sense of community, namely through the avenues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's one of the key features, qualities that I looked at when trying to decide, hey, which residency program do I want to attend over the next 4 or so years. And yeah, Neuro Twitter was new for everyone. It was new for all of us, including the people that spoke to you. New programs and respective directors and residents. So for me, because we're kind of known as the COVID class, this class of 2021, I think Twitter was the most innovative, one of the best ways to showcase a residency program, because our COVID class was kind of denied the opportunities that I believe have already resumed, namely the opportunity to do away rotations at programs you're interested in. And so NeuroTwitter offered this fresh new avenue, this fresh new platform in which you could kind of sell your program. And for me, since I was already using social media more than excessively, I figured that the programs that really went above and beyond and showcasing their features, their qualities should merit a little boost on my personal ranking list of the programs where I wanted to attend. And that's exactly the way it played out. There were certain programs that really did highlight their efforts at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for those programs, obviously, I kind of ranked above more others than other programs on my list. And so, yeah, I used Twitter primarily last year to find the program for me. And all the while, even when I kind of shifted over from a more social to a more professional look of my Twitter account, I kind of maintained my sense of style. How, some of my hobbies include dancing, particularly Latino dancing, reggaeton, cumbia, etc. And I found another community, more of a hashtag, not really a more formal community, called Latinx in Neuro, which is kind of a branch of, in general, Latinos in medicine. And through that community, through that hashtag, and all these other Latinx folks, residents, people in medicine that I've met, I've been able to interact with them, maintain my Latinx heritage through this more virtual, digital platform that I guess regrettably, unfortunately, have been denied or haven't been afforded at my own previous institution, because we kind of lacked the Hispanic numbers. I use my Twitter account to kind of, keep up with or to get in or discuss the latest sports, the sports shenanigans that are going on nationally through this medical community. And it's, it's reassuring to me that in addition to everyone maintaining the professional responsibilities and obligations and duties on this Twitter platform, this Twitter platform can also be used to express yourself individually through your hobbies. And also, as somebody who comes from from a rural background, which I've come to find out that I'm much in a large sense part of the minority there. It also has given me, allowed me to see how people from rural backgrounds, do in medicine, and how they persevere in medicine. So in many ways, yeah, I have used Twitter for the right reasons, to find the best fit for residency last year. But Twitter also allows you to express your own individual sense of personality on this platform.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have Dr. Farris as well.
Hi, I'm Susie. It says I'm from Winston-Salem, but I'm actually from a really rural little area outside of Winston-Salem. So I can echo what Dr. Juarez said as a rural person from a small town. I came to medicine late. It's actually my second career. I'm 37. So I'm a non-traditional student, and my all Winston, all Wake page doesn't really do justice to the variety of places that I've lived and the things that I've done. So coming to Twitter, I also had an old Twitter, but this one is pretty new because I lost my two-factor authentication on my old one, so I couldn't port my old Twitter to this new one. So this is my professional Twitter, and I guess I got on a Reddit thread last summer and decided that since we didn't have those opportunities, we didn't have away rotations, we didn't have the opportunity to interview in person. Lockdown was such that we couldn't even visit some of these towns at all. I thought it would be really helpful to look at all of the social media platforms, and Twitter turned out to be the best one in many ways, because it allowed me to network with a lot of different people, other non-traditional students, other people from rural, sort of low socioeconomic status backgrounds, and other LGBTQ people, and people going into neurology, other parts of medicine, to see some perspectives on current events in medicine, current events in neurology in particular, and also to follow follow residency programs. And I found that there were particular faculty members who were sharing educational content that I found really helpful, and I found that attractive in terms of being drawn to their programs. I think it's a great way to link up with people who match your interests, and a great way to show who you are. That's kind of all I have.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you for sharing your story. So just really quickly, I'm going to post it in the chat as well, but all of you guys, actually, except for Dr. Juarez, but I know you've been an influential person as well on creating the second guide. And this is the link to this. If you guys aren't already aware of it, will be posted in your in the chat as well. But going back, the first question I kind of wanted to start off as, I know a lot of us talk about a lot of the pros of Twitter. And it's always easy to talk about the good things, but was there ever a point during your residency recruitment that you were like, uh-oh, Twitter may not have necessarily been the best thing, and things you learned throughout your process in order to be able to become a better user on NeuroTwitter? And we'll start with Dr. Reyes.
I think for me, one of the hesitations I always had was how much I should include in terms of my ideas or opinions about social justice and advocacy, just because I know that conversations about racism and injustice can be very polarizing. And I was worried that my opinions would be too aggressive. And so sometimes I would repost cases or of injustice or topics surrounding advocacy and racism. And sometimes I had to do a double take and see, is this going to harm me in terms of my applications? And that's something that I think everyone on social media is always super conscious about, is whether too much of not professional things in your life, if too much of that can impede or change people's perspectives about you. And so there were times when I said, oh man, maybe Twitter is going to harm me in my applications. But then I thought, if I am going to be happy in a place, then I should be in a place where people accept me for my opinions, as long as I'm respectful about it and thoughtful about how I approach or discuss people about what my opinions are concerning racism and social justice. And so after a little while, I got over that fear and just started being very liberal about what I thought was important to share in that space. And so that's the only thing I sort of gave pause I pause sometimes. Is this too much, or are people going to think not so good things about me? And then I'm very Christian, so sometimes I would repost positive things surrounding Christianity, and also thought, oh man, religion is probably something I shouldn't share on Twitter, but also a big part of who I am. And so those are the moments where I thought maybe maybe Twitter is not the place where I should be doing these things. But I got over those things because you got to take me with all that I come, as long as I'm respectful, of course, and thoughtful.
And how about you, Dr. Juarez? Since you've had a lot of experience on social media prior to joining NeuroTwitter, did it kind of change in terms of how you thought of using Twitter and going through the residency recruitment period?
Yeah, if there's one thing folks, pretty soon find out about me is that I'm very much involved, and not involved, but like I have a penchant for politics, and I'm not scared to express my views or retweet one of my favorite politicians' thoughts, etc. In particular, a lot of Georgia politicians. So again, it goes back to maintaining my personal sense of style, my personal vibes on Twitter. Very cognizant that there's a very fine line between professionalism, your professional Twitter, and your social Twitter, so to speak. But again, I believe that if a program, much the same way that Stephanie expressed it, if a program is interested in me, they should know what kind of political ideology, what kind of values I uphold, and in all sorts of respects. So in a way, yes, I did initially, in my mind, I gave it pause and said, hey, Eric, do you think it'd be the right move to, retweet President Biden's thoughts, or as opposed to retweeting or expressing some thoughts on President Trump's latest actions? And I figured, no, this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to continue to be. So whether or not it harms me in any way, have at it. I believe that Twitter is a platform for everyone to use freely and without too much consequences. And for me, if it means some residency program docking points because of my political beliefs, my political ideologies, or just in general my morals, what values that I uphold, or give considerable weight, then so be it. I guess that residency program doesn't deserve to have me or folks like me. And in many ways, the thoughts that I have are those thoughts that are traditionally have been just like repressed or haven't been vocalized or verbalized enough. And so in a way, I also feel like I'm giving a voice to the voiceless in many of these occasions, because a lot of folks who come from backgrounds like me, low socioeconomic status, rural, Latinx, we need more people, more individuals to speak up on their behalf, because not only do folks like me lack severely in numbers, but by virtue, we also lack severely in representation. So that's my little spiel on that. And that's my own personal take. And again, talking politics is, it's always subject to controversy, whether at the dining table or, whether on a platform like Twitter. So I guess the best advice would be to just give it a considerable thought. And if you feel like this is an adequate representation of yourself, then by all means, go ahead and express yourself.
Thank you both for sharing. Kind of the rule of thumb we talked about with Dr. Lawson and Dr. Kerr at our session last week, that you guys should definitely check out if you didn't see it, was that would you be okay tweeting something that your attending would see, as well as your patients? I think that's the really good framework. And all of us advocate for our patients. We all do it differently. And that's the really cool thing about NeuroTwitter, is that you're able to do it through your own lens. And not only that, you're able to find people, as Dr. Voodoo said, that can advocate in the same way that you do, which is a really cool opportunity you may not be able to. Being in the Midwest, like I was at Indiana or Dr. Reyes was at Michigan, different parts of the country have different ways of viewing things. And that's a really cool thing about a thing that's online and on social media. You can really amplify voices to help advocate for your patients. I think all of us advocate in our own way. and we all do it differently, which is really cool. Shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to get Dr. Farris's thought about the technology side, and seeing like, is Twitter easy to use? And kind of your experience, using in the past, but starting a second career. How did you find NeuroTwitter when you joined it, coming from using it in the past and now using it for the second time?
I mean, I guess Twitter's always had a pretty self-explanatory user interface, I thought. I mean, I think that getting used to 160 characters and planning for if you're going to do a thread and you want to do multiple posts and you have to decide how to space those out and number them, was certainly an adjustment. But one of my previous iterations was doing tech support, so I think all things computer are sort of native to me. But I thought Twitter was really easy to use, and I don't feel like it's changed a whole lot. I think that the people that use Twitter and the tone of Twitter and the things that it's used for are different. I think that it's grown so much. It's so much more diverse and rich than it was 10 years ago. People hadn't really figured out what it was for 10 years ago. So it's been an interesting landscape to get to know in this last year. And it's wonderful. There's so much to see. There's so much you can learn. And I think that just wasn't there 10 years ago.
And then kind of going to the interview process itself, and we'll talk to Dr. Voodoo and Dr. Dawood to kind of get a sense from both lenses, from the applicant perspective as well as the residency program, since Dr. Voodoo mentioned that he actually created a MGB Twitter account, to kind of get a sense of, were there awkward interactions? Were there, oh, hey, I know you on Twitter, you did great work, or kind of what was I know Dr. Reyes has a great story about that. If we have time, we'll come to her as well, but kind of what was the sense of going through your interviews? Was NeuroTwitter brought up? And if so, was it in a positive way? Or were there unfortunately negative consequences from being on Twitter too? And we'll start with Dr. Dawood from the applicant side.
Yeah, definitely. So I think for me, it was actually brought up in a majority of my interviews. I think just the context of how everyone was shifting to virtual platforms and programs are trying to kind of market their programs and have their residents kind of also share their experience on a day-to-day basis, since we weren't able to do away rotations and everything. So I followed pretty much all the neurology programs. And then when I interviewed, I think, it was it brought like in a sense of familiarity. And that was kind of where it created a platform of familiarity for the interview. And so I think one of my first interviews, one of the PDs was like, oh, I saw that you shared this research article that you did. Tell me more about it. And, I got a chance to look at it, but, tell me more, since obviously you're limited by 160 characters. Now this is an opportunity for you to kind of elaborate on that. And then as well as, having a social media platform and maintaining that and following people and interacting takes a lot of work too. And I think programs appreciated that, because you didn't have to make a Twitter, but doing that and showing interest and following the programs and being able to really engage and putting in the effort to engage. Not that it's like a terrible amount of effort, but it still is something that you have to do and keep up with. And I think they appreciated that. And like I said, I think it made the interview a bit more less stressful and gave a sense of familiarity to go off of.
And then Dr. Voodoo, from the other side, being a resident at the time, kind of what was your perspective in terms of, were favorites played to people on Twitter? Was it kind of an even playing field? Did you get to actually learn about applicants before they even came to campus? As well as, what did your program find useful in using Twitter to be able to market itself to applicants?
Thanks, Aaron. And it's a little bit of a difficult question too, and it's something we talked quite a bit, because there's a lot of people who don't use Twitter. So as a residency, should we be, kind of almost giving a leg up for people who do use Twitter if they already get to know us? So we really tried to be really impartial. And I'll say for anyone who follows a residency program, and if they don't follow you back, that doesn't mean that they don't like you. It's just that we potentially don't want to show any bias or any preference to anyone. And in terms of kind of looking specifically at applicants from the residency Twitter side, we try not to do that too much because, again, it's hard for things to be, especially in the digital world, to really have things translate across different platforms. So we didn't want to take anything out of context, trying not to hold anything against someone or try to give them kind of a leg up or something positive. So we tried to really make it a neutral part in terms of looking at applicants, whereas that we're not basically evaluating you on your Twitter. And that was kind of an active decision. In terms of what we tried to do is really broadcast our program. So one, emphasize kind of the educational opportunities that are part of the program, as well as kind of a lot of the residents' experiences, especially since given the virtual application season, you aren't really going to meet these people physically or also kind of see how they interact on a daily basis. So that's just for our specific program. And we've really tried to minimize that because of the bias that just inherently comes into play. I can't speak to other programs, but I know, or I can't speak for all other programs, but I know other programs do a similar route where they try not to hold things against applicants or try to really, they don't research your Twitter history. But I say that with a grain of salt because, who knows, there might be other programs that do that. So again, be yourself, but also try to be professional as well.
Thank you. And I can tell you from our perspective as well, we do the same thing, right? It can only help you, but generally it's not part of your residency application. I've talked to multiple program directors as well throughout different panels that I've been on and different initiatives like this. But it can be a positive. And, in reality, in a time last year when we weren't able to have away rotations and weren't able to get to meet the sub-Is, that was definitely a stronger tool. As things change, the question now becomes, what is Twitter going to look like going forward? And we'll actually end off by letting everyone answer this question in like a minute or two, because I think there's one in the Q&A, but I can't see it. Can anyone else see it? I don't know why I'm having trouble. What's in the Q&A? What question is it before we get to that question to kind of bring us to the close?
It says, is it important that my Twitter page be public? Trying to weigh privacy versus engagement.
So that's a great question. I'll take that just to answer it quickly. You do what makes you feel comfortable. As we've all said tonight, it's really for your benefit as an applicant. If you don't feel it being okay to have it public, then definitely it's your tool at how you want to use it. If you just want to follow programs, I don't think anyone's going to judge you either way, whether it's public or private. And you want to be comfortable with your Twitter account. And if that's where you're at, that's totally reasonable. Other people, we did notice last year as well that people made alias accounts as well without their name to be able to follow the residency accounts and get all the information without having their name public as well. And I think that's just the unfortunate reality being a new territory for a lot of applicants and also programs. No one is really sure if it would be held against them or if it'll be a positive thing. So they just erred on the side of caution, which is totally reasonable as well as a fourth-year applicant. Our goal for tonight is to tell you that within reason, it should be your own Twitter account and be your own professional identity. And I think that's what we're hopefully encouraging all of you to do and to really make it your own. So I appreciate that question. Okay, so we will end off. I don't think there are any more in the Q&A. I think that was the only one. And kind of have everyone kind of tell us what their vision is for NeuroTwitter beyond just this application cycle and also beyond COVID-19 and how you guys see yourselves continuing to use NeuroTwitter to help advance your patients' issues, your own personal things you're working on in the clinic, in legislation and policy, and kind of how you guys wanted to grow in the future as well. We're going to go in reverse order as we started. So I think it's Dr. Farris first.
Well, I like to use Twitter to share academic articles that I found so that I can spread knowledge around in the neuro Twitter community. I also really like to use it for advocacy. I care very much about residency training and the culture of residency training, and about sort of the business of healthcare and how that has evolved over time. And so I think speaking out about those issues is something I will always do on Twitter. But sort of a dual function between talking about being a doctor and talking about the kind of medicine that I do, and trying to get as much information as I can and trying to give as much away as I can too.
Thank you. See if this will go back. Hold on. There we go. Dr. Juarez.
Well, yeah, there's definitely been an exponential growth of the number of the types of users, or the types of people that have used Twitter since its inception back in 2008, 2007. I think from what I saw during those early years, it seemed like, only the tweets of celebrities, the VIPs were given more focus. But now that many more individuals across the world are using it to engage with each other, it feels like everyone has a voice. Everyone has like the potential for his or her tweet to, go viral and have their voice amplified. So in many ways, I think the future of neuro Twitter and Twitter as a whole is only going to continue to expand. And not just neuro Twitter, but Twitter as a whole, I think it kind of bridges the gap between folks who have influence on issues. You can be some random Joe from middle of nowhere, Southwest Georgia, and you can speak your issues freely on a certain issue, and hopefully maybe it might get enough traffic to go viral. So in many ways, I think Twitter has given, again, another avenue, another platform for people to have their voices amplified. And again, I think for communities of color, for folks who are traditionally underrepresented in medicine, I think this can only, people who use Twitter as a platform, it behooves them to speak up on behalf of many people, or of the voiceless, as I like to put it.
Oop, wrong way. Sorry. Hey, there we go. Dr. Voodoo.
I think I definitely agree with Susie and Eric. In addition to having a voice and a platform and building on that and having an audience to interact with. But in addition to that, I also just think the way that Twitter works, you get a little bit of information, but you get a lot of it in a little bit of time. And we're also very busy and have short attention spans. So I think from that aspect, when people share different medical things, literature, new research, I think the platform itself caters to that, and to the continuation of its utility in that sense. But also I think it stays around, it's going to stay around, it's going to grow, because people also come to Twitter with concerns about different clinical standards of practice and different techniques and standard of care. And people, will debate different things, and not necessarily debate, but discuss and share articles with each other. And I use those as, inspiration for kind of the questions that I ask, and for research purposes as well, and getting involved and knowing which questions to ask. And lastly, I think that the virtual platform of Twitter will continue to supplement the in-person conferences that will go on for the AN and other neurology conferences and organizations throughout the years to come. So,
why does it keep going forward? Sorry about that. There we go. Dr. Voodoo.
Yeah, so I think Twitter, and especially neuro Twitter has just been so great in connecting with people, especially people who normally you'd be a little bit afraid to follow, or like to add on Facebook or to add on LinkedIn, like the chair of the department at so-and-so university, and you're able to connect, follow. So I think the education, as well as seeing thoughts from different thought leaders in the field, is great. I'll say, kind of personally for me, I'm going to continue to use Twitter just for basically my advocacy against racism, against unconscious and conscious bias, and really towards the efforts of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. One thing that Twitter has actually shown me as well is that I've actually connected with a lot of my patients, which is, it's a fine balance. And that's why sometimes I'm careful about kind of posting anything regarding patients. But for example, I'm a neuro-oncology fellow, and a lot of brain tumor patients follow me, and I follow a lot of brain tumor patients. And it's really helped me see their journey during certain parts of their lives in which, as a physician, I'm not privy to in the clinic or in the hospital. And it's actually been a very enriching experience. And I think it's actually made me a much better clinician and a doctor. And kind of, we actually come around similar causes. Actually, there was a chemotherapy, generic CCNU, that the price shot up quite a bit. It was another one of these kind of drug pricing stories. And it was great to see both neuro-oncologists, the physicians, come together with the patients as well as the patient advocacy groups. And we all got together on Twitter. And things like that, that kind of organic connection, it's really hard to get elsewhere. So, I think neuro Twitter and Twitter is just going to continue to really grow, especially given the pandemic and everything going on. It's just a great resource for just us as well as patients too.
I actually never thought about it that way. That's a really interesting point. I do follow 2 or 3 patients on Twitter, but I guess when you specialize, you definitely get to know your patients a lot better and advocate for them as well, which is really cool. See, I'm learning something new tonight as well. This the cool parts about these sessions, I get to learn too. And Dr. Reyes to lead us into the sunset.
I like what you did there. Clever. I think something very special about Neuro Twitter is Neuro MedEd and all of the initiatives surrounding ending neurophobia. I always look forward to cases or small bits of sort of summary high yield points about syndromes that aren't commonly seen in the ED or in other sort of gen med services that non-neurologists don't know a lot about, but that they think it's sort of like a black hole or something that they can never fully come out of and not fully understand. And to see it sort of broken up into very easy to follow chunks on Neuro Twitter makes me so happy. And I feel like the more people that get on that train, the better for not just neurologists, but everyone outside neurology, because a lot of our patients are seen by general practitioners and all types of physicians that should know neurology really well. And so that I think is really special. And I hope to contribute in some way to medical education on Twitter and contribute in terms of consolidating some of those resources with the Neuro Twitter network initiative as well. So that's something I really like about Twitter and appreciate about it.
And that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you to all the attendees. Thank you to all the panelists for taking time out of your busy residency and fellowships. I really appreciate it. I got to learn some cool things tonight as well. But more importantly, hopefully the 4th-year applicants applying into neurology and the future of neurology hopefully got something out of this as well. And the people who will be listening to this recording too will hopefully get something. Thank you everyone for your time. And we're a couple minutes late. But I think we are all finished. So we'll tune over to Lucy and Allison if they have anything else for us.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining again. Like it was said earlier, this is recorded. So once edited, it'll be available on AAN.com and AAN YouTube. We also want to let everyone know the applications for awards, scholarships, and leadership programs have opened. So please check out the AAN.com website. It was placed in the chat for more information. But otherwise, thank you everyone and have a great night.
Thank you.